adverse childhood experiences affect more of us than we think. The original research does pick up on quite serious adverse childhood experiences where perhaps the child has really suffered either physically or emotionally. But on that spectrum, not necessarily even at the other end of that spectrum, is more a history of kind of normal adverse childhood experiences where perhaps a parent in the house was depressed, or there was a relationship that was not going well, and actually so there was a low level of aggression between parents, or it may be that a parent was unable to cope and therefore you experienced a small amount of neglect. Now, that doesn't mean that you were always unwashed or you weren't fed. It may have been that your emotional needs were not quite met. Now, this is not outside the realms of sort of almost normal life in some respects. So you may have had, as I say, parents who'd argued. And actually, sometimes as a child, what we then do is we go slightly into a freeze pattern at that point because we don't want to do anything that triggers that. So it may be that we've adjusted our nervous system at that point because we're always on high alert. And essentially, actually, if mum and dad set to, then actually we would then retreat, or we'd go and hide, or we'd be very quiet. And over time, what this does, as I say, and with that sort of hypersensitivity to it, we do adjust the way the nervous system functions, and it works at a slightly raised level. It's working on slight overdrive. And what we know, when there's irritability within the nervous system, it can lead to chronic pain later on in life. So as I say, one's caregivers may have been unhappy and arguing somewhat, and actually then one of them may have left. And this then leaves you thinking, oh my goodness, I hope that wasn't my fault. And what you can then do actually is become and develop people-pleasing personality traits, because essentially you don't want it to be your fault. You want to make sure it's all right. It may be that the parent that you've stayed with actually then doesn't cope terribly well. They may have depression. They may be on antidepressants. They may then not be able to provide you with the support that you want. And all of these actually are adverse childhood experiences. Anything really that at a young age your nervous system has been triggered and is perhaps not being co-regulated. Young nervous systems really need a parent or caregiver to help us to regulate our way through emotional events. And essentially, if it's the caregiver that's in trouble, or the caregiver that is aggressive, or the caregiver that shouts, or the caregiver that drinks, your young nervous system in that moment didn't receive the support that it needed. And it leaves us with this pattern of being unsettled. And the research shows that if you have if you have 3 or more adverse childhood experiences, you are 30 times more likely to suffer with a chronic pain condition when you're older. More adverse childhood experiences actually increases your risk of other health issues. Whilst we say, what do we do about this? Because it's happened and there's nothing I can do about it. Well, actually, recognising it is really important, and understanding it means that we can then start to change the way your nervous system operates now, even if that is sort of feels like an embedded pattern from childhood. I think also what it does is it sometimes makes us think, oh gosh, no, now I understand. Now I understand perhaps why my nervous system has been like this. And it's not, one has to be a little bit cautious that then one doesn't say, oh, I can't change that because I've had that since childhood, that happened to me. We can change and reframe our reaction to it in adulthood, even if it happened to us in the child. It will have had an effect, absolutely, but we can, with knowledge and understanding and getting it into our conscious mind, actually change the way that works. So if you can imagine, as I say, a small child's nervous system that has been activated on a continuous basis that way, then it is easy to understand why it's overacting and why it's not feeling safe. So looking at this again, if you feel this is something that you need assistance with, please reach out on the support page to a practitioner who can help you with it. But the other way is to look at those patterns of stress and anxiety. And anything that you can do to start to reframe that, it might be journaling, it might be meditation, it might be just catching it in that moment so that you know that you're safe, reassuring yourself, doing some inner child work so that you are starting to parent yourself as an adult and feeling safe and bringing safety into that situation. So as I say, adverse childhood experiences are important. They don't necessarily have to have been severe for them to have had an effect on our nervous system later on. And the other thing to note is that actually sometimes that change within the nervous system has happened to us at a very, very young age. It may have actually happened in utero, and it may have happened when we were sort of precognitive in those first 2 or 3 years of life. For instance, if you've been in special care as a baby, or you again had different homes, foster care or something like that when you were young, it can actually make a difference to the way that your nervous system is functioning now. But all is not lost. We can change that by being aware of it, and again teaching our nervous systems that we're safe, teaching our nervous system that it's okay. And we will do that across the Reprogram Your Stress and Anxiety